I discovered my best friend of 20 years was stealing from me while she was helping me plan my husband's funeral. Not afterward, when grief makes people careless with details. Not weeks later, when I might have blamed my own distraction. Right there in my kitchen, 2 days after Henry died, while she was supposedly organizing the memorial service and I was drowning in casseroles and condolence cards. Her name was Linda Morrison, and I trusted her with everything. My house keys. My deepest secrets. My financial passwords. The location of Henry's life insurance documents. She was the friend who'd held my hand through 2 miscarriages. The one who'd driven me to chemotherapy appointments when Henry was too sick himself to leave the house. The woman I'd called at 3 in the morning when I was scared and alone and needed someone to tell me everything would be okay. She was also the woman currently sitting at my kitchen table, using my laptop to transfer $47,000 from my savings account to hers. I watched from the hallway, hidden by the shadow of the staircase, as she typed with the focused efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Her fingers moved across the keyboard like she was writing an email, casual and confident. On the screen, I could see my bank account balance dropping in real time. $87,432, $62,147, $34,891, $15,216. Oh, Martha, she whispered to herself, shaking her head with what looked like genuine sadness. You're going to be so lost without Henry. Good thing you have me to help manage everything. She was stealing my money while talking about how much she cared about me. The audacity was breathtaking. I stood frozen in my own hallway, watching my best friend systematically rob me while she pretended to organize my husband's funeral. Every click of the mouse was another piece of my financial security disappearing into accounts I'd never authorized. But here's the thing about grief. It strips away the illusions you didn't know you were carrying. And in that moment, watching Linda drain my savings with the same hands that had patted my shoulder while I cried, I realized something that should have terrified me. I wasn't surprised. Not really. Because somewhere, in the back of my mind where we store the truths we don't want to examine, I'd known something was wrong for months. Maybe longer. The expensive jewelry Linda had started wearing, despite complaining about money troubles. The new car she'd bought after claiming her insurance company was giving her problems with a claim. The way she'd insisted on handling more and more of my financial affairs as Henry got sicker, claiming she wanted to take the burden off me. I'd ignored the signs because I'd needed her. Because when your husband is dying slowly of liver disease and you're watching the strongest person you've ever known become weak and dependent, you cling to anyone who offers help. Even when that help comes with a price you're too afraid to calculate. But Henry was gone now. And Linda thought grief had made me vulnerable. She was about to learn how wrong she was. I'd been Martha Henley for 43 years, married to Henry since I was 22. We'd never had children, not by choice, just by the cruel mathematics of miscarriage and failed fertility treatments. So when Henry died, I became something I'd never been before, truly alone. Or so I thought. Linda had materialized at my hospital bedside within hours of Henry's death, armed with tissues, legal advice, and a seemingly endless capacity for handling details I couldn't face. She'd coordinated with the funeral home, contacted Henry's employer, even helped me write his obituary. Don't worry about any of this, she'd said, squeezing my hand as we sat in the funeral director's office. I'll take care of everything. You just focus on healing. I'd been grateful. More than grateful, I'd been relieved. The administrative aftermath of death is overwhelming under the best circumstances. When you're numb with grief and exhausted from months of caregiving, it feels impossible. So I'd let Linda take the lead. I'd given her access to Henry's files, my computer, even power of attorney forms, just in case I became too distraught to handle things myself. I'd trusted her completely. The first sign something was wrong came when I tried to pay the funeral home. My debit card was declined. That's odd, I'd said, embarrassed. Let me try another account. That card was declined too. The bank must have frozen something because of Henry's death, Linda had said smoothly. These things happen. I'll call them tomorrow and get it sorted out. Don't worry about it. I'll cover the costs for now. I'd been touched by her generosity. grateful for her quick thinking. I'd also been a fool. When I got home that evening, I'd tried to log into my online banking to check the status of my accounts. My password had been changed. That's strange, I'd muttered, trying different combinations of passwords I might have used. What's strange? Linda had asked from the kitchen, where she was organizing sympathy flowers. I can't get into my bank account online. The password isn't working. Oh, I had them reset it when I called today. Too many security protocols when there's a death in the family. I'll give you the new password tomorrow after the funeral. One less thing for you to worry about. She'd sounded so reasonable. So caring. So much like the friend I'd depended on for 2 decades. But something in my chest had tightened. A small voice, easily ignored, that whispered, "Why wouldn't she give me my own password right now?" I'd brushed the feeling aside. Linda was trying to help. She was protecting me from additional stress during an already difficult time. At least, that's what I'd told myself. The funeral was on a Thursday. Gray November sky, cold enough to see your breath, the kind of weather that makes everything feel more final. Linda stood beside me at the graveside, holding my arm as they lowered Henry's casket into the ground. "He was a good man," she'd whispered. "You were lucky to have each other." I'd nodded, tears freezing on my cheeks, grateful for her presence. Grateful for her strength when mine had abandoned me. After the service, she'd driven me home and helped me clean up the aftermath, folding chairs, returning casserole dishes, dealing with the awkward social choreography of people who wanted to help but didn't know how. "Why don't you rest?" she'd suggested around 7 o'clock. "I'll finish up down here and let myself out." "Are you sure?" "Of course. That's what friends are for." I'd hugged her, overwhelmed with gratitude for her kindness, her selflessness, her unwavering support during the worst period of my life. Then I'd gone upstairs to take a shower, exhausted by grief and the emotional drain of public mourning. That's when I'd heard the typing. Rapid, focused keystrokes coming from the kitchen below. The distinctive sound of someone working on a computer with purpose and urgency. At first, I'd assumed she was responding to condolence emails on my behalf, another kindness, another burden lifted from my shoulders. But something about the rhythm had seemed wrong. Too quick. Too secretive. So I'd crept downstairs in my bathrobe, moving carefully to avoid the creaking floorboard at the bottom of the steps. And I'd seen her. My best friend. My trusted confidant. My financial advisor and emotional support system. Stealing from me. Not just stealing, systematically emptying my accounts with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd planned this moment carefully. She had my bank routing numbers memorized. She knew exactly which accounts held the most money. She even knew Henry's social security number, which she was using to access his retirement fund. I'd stood there for 10 minutes, watching her work. Watching her transfer decades of careful savings into accounts I'd never seen before. Watching her steal my financial security while humming under her breath like she was paying bills. When she finished, she logged out carefully and closed the laptop. Then she'd pulled out her phone and made a call. "It's done," she'd said quietly. "Yeah, about 60,000 total. She won't notice for weeks. By then, it'll be too late to reverse anything." A pause while the person on the other end responded. "No, she's completely out of it. Grief is better than drugs for making people compliant. She'll probably thank me for handling her finances." Another pause. "Trust me, I've been planning this for months." She signed everything I need. Power of attorney, beneficiary forms, access to all her accounts. She has no idea what's happening. That's when I'd understood. This wasn't opportunistic theft born from sudden greed. This was a long-term plan that had been in motion since before Henry died. Maybe since before Henry got sick. Linda had been playing the long game, positioning herself as my indispensable support system so she could rob me when I was most vulnerable. She'd cultivated our friendship. She'd earned my trust. She'd made herself essential to my life. All so she could destroy it. But as I stood there, listening to her laugh with her accomplice about how easy I'd been to manipulate, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Clarity. For the first time since Henry's diagnosis, my mind felt sharp and focused. The fog of grief and exhaustion lifted, replaced by crystalline anger and absolute determination. Linda thought she was dealing with a broken, helpless widow. She was about to meet Martha Henley, the woman who'd built a successful accounting practice from nothing, who'd managed complex financial portfolios for 30 years, who'd navigated her husband's medical crisis with competence and grace. The woman who knew exactly how to fight back. Linda left at 9:30, kissing my cheek and promising to check on me the next day. "Get some rest, honey," she'd said. "Tomorrow will be easier." She was wrong about that. The moment her car pulled out of my driveway, I was at my computer. It took me 20 minutes to regain access to my bank accounts, longer than it should have, because my hands were shaking with rage. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. The theft hadn't started that evening. It had been going on for 3 months. Small amounts at first, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. Amounts that could be explained as legitimate expenses related to Henry's care or household emergencies. But as Henry got sicker and I'd given Linda more access to help manage things, the amounts had grown larger and more frequent. By my calculation, she'd stolen over $90,000. Not just from my savings accounts, but from Henry's retirement fund, our investment portfolio, even the small account I'd set aside for my own funeral expenses someday. She'd been systematic, methodical, and devastatingly thorough. But she'd also been sloppy. Every transaction was documented. Every transfer had a digital trail. Every theft was recorded with the precision of modern banking systems that made financial crimes almost impossible to hide from someone who knew what to look for. And I knew exactly what to look for. I'd spent 3 decades as a CPA before retiring 5 years ago. I'd built my career on understanding money flows, detecting discrepancies, and reconstructing financial narratives from incomplete records. I'd helped clients navigate audits, divorces, and bankruptcy proceedings. I'd never used those skills to track down someone who'd robbed me, but the principles were the same. By 2 in the morning, I had a complete picture of Linda's theft. Not just the amounts and dates, but the methods and the accounts where my money had gone. She'd been clever about dispersing the funds across multiple banks and investment vehicles, but not clever enough to hide the patterns from someone with forensic accounting experience. I also had something else, a recording app on my phone that I downloaded months ago when Henry's doctors were giving complex medical instructions I was afraid I'd forget. I'd still been running the app when Linda made her phone call. I had evidence. I had documentation. I had a complete financial trail. What I didn't have was a plan. At 3 in the morning, I called my lawyer. James Crawford had handled our wills and estate planning for 15 years. He was also one of the few people I trusted completely, and someone Linda had no reason to suspect might be involved in my response. "Martha, I'm so sorry to hear about Henry," he said when he answered his phone. "Are you all right?" "It's very late. James, I need help. Someone has been stealing from me." I told him everything. The months of growing financial control, the power of attorney forms, the systematic theft, the recorded phone conversation. He listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification about amounts or methods. "How much are we talking about total?" he asked when I finished. "Just over $90,000. "My God. And you have documentation of all this?" "Bank records, transaction histories, even a recording of her admitting to the theft." "Who else knows about this?" "Just you. Linda thinks I'm too grief-stricken to notice anything. She's planning to continue the theft, maybe even accelerate it while I'm vulnerable." James was quiet for a moment. "Martha, this is serious criminal fraud. We're not just talking about a civil lawsuit. This is embezzlement, elder abuse, exploitation of a vulnerable person. If we pursue this fully, she's looking at significant prison time." "Good. Are you sure?" "This will be public, messy, and emotionally difficult. Everyone in town will know what happened. Your friendship, your grief, your financial situation, all of it will become public record. She made it public the moment she decided to steal from a widow at her husband's funeral." "All right then. What do you want to do?" "I want to get my money back. All of it. With interest. And I want to make sure she can't do this to anyone else." "We can do that. But we need to be smart about it. If she realizes you've discovered the theft, she might try to hide assets or destroy evidence." "What do you suggest?" "We lay a trap. Let her think you're still unaware while we document everything she does. Build an airtight case before we spring it. How long will that take? A week, maybe 2. Long enough to let her get comfortable and make more mistakes. I thought about that. A week of pretending to be the helpless widow while Linda continued to steal from me. A week of acting grateful for her support while she robbed me blind. I can do that, I said. But James, I want her to know it was me who caught her. When this all comes out, I want her to understand that she didn't outsmart a grieving old woman. She got outplayed by someone who was smarter than her all along. We can arrange that. After I hung up with James, I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Linda had robbed me while pretending to care about my well-being, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Power. For the first time since Henry's diagnosis, I wasn't reacting to circumstances beyond my control. I was choosing my response. I was taking action. I was fighting back. Linda had made a fundamental miscalculation. She'd assumed that grief would make me weak and stupid. She'd forgotten that I'd been strong and smart long before I'd been sad. Linda called the next morning, her voice warm with synthetic concern. "How are you holding up, honey? Did you get some sleep?" "A little," I said, injecting just the right amount of exhaustion into my voice. "Thank you again for everything yesterday. I don't know what I would have done without you. That's what friends are for." "Listen, I was thinking, maybe we should go through Henry's paperwork today. Get things organized while the momentum is there." Momentum. That was an interesting word choice. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. I understand, but the longer we wait, the harder it gets. And there are probably things that need immediate attention, insurance claims, account transfers, that sort of thing. She was right about that, just not in the way she meant. "If you think it's important." "I do. Why don't I come over this afternoon? We can tackle it together." After she hung up, I spent the morning preparing for her visit. Not by organizing Henry's paperwork, but by setting up surveillance equipment that James had recommended. A small camera hidden on my bookshelf, positioned to record the kitchen table where she'd been working. A backup recording device in my pocket. A separate computer logged into my bank accounts so I could monitor any new transactions in real time. I also called my bank and spoke to the fraud department. "I need to report potential unauthorized access to my accounts," I told them. "But I want to document the full extent of the fraud before I freeze anything." They put a monitoring alert on my accounts that would track every transaction while still allowing access. A paper trail that would be admissible in court. Linda arrived at 2 o'clock with coffee and pastries, a thoughtful gesture that might have touched me if I hadn't known she was paying for them with my own money. "I thought we could start with the filing cabinet in Henry's office," she said, settling in at the kitchen table with her laptop. "Make sure we haven't missed anything important." "That sounds good. But maybe you could help me with something first? I'm confused about my bank accounts." Her face showed just the slightest flicker of alarm. "What kind of confusion?" "Well, I tried to check my balance this morning, and it seems lower than I expected. Maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I thought we had more in savings." "Oh, honey," she said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone people use with children and the elderly. "Grief affects memory in all sorts of ways. Plus, you've had a lot of expenses lately, medical bills, funeral costs, that sort of thing. Maybe you're right. But could you help me understand the numbers? I'd feel better if I knew exactly where things stand." "Of course. Let me pull up your accounts." I watched her log into my banking website with passwords she'd changed without my permission, accessing accounts she had no legal right to control. The camera was recording every keystroke. "See," she said, turning the laptop screen toward me. "You have 37,000 in checking and 18,000 in savings. That's plenty to get you through the next few months." She was lying. I could see from my hidden monitoring system that my actual balances were less than 8,000 total. But on the screen she was showing me, she'd somehow manipulated the display to show false numbers. "That does seem like plenty," I agreed. I guess I was worried over nothing. "Grief makes us worry about everything," she said sympathetically. "That's why it's so important to have people you can trust to help you think clearly." Trust. Another interesting word choice. For the next hour, I played the role of the helpless widow while Linda systematically went through Henry's files, identifying assets I didn't know she knew about. His pension fund. His small investment portfolio. Even a savings bond he'd bought years ago that I'd forgotten about. Every asset she discovered, she made notes about in a small notebook. Not for my benefit, for hers. She was cataloging everything she planned to steal. "Oh, look at this," she said, holding up Henry's life insurance policy. $200,000. That'll be a real blessing for you. I'd forgotten about that. The important thing is making sure the claim gets filed properly. These insurance companies can be tricky about paying out if all the paperwork isn't perfect. Would you help me with that? Of course. In fact, why don't I handle the whole process? You shouldn't have to deal with bureaucratic nonsense while you're grieving. She wanted control of the life insurance money too. That's so generous of you. It's not generous, it's what Henry would have wanted. He'd want to know someone was taking care of you. The manipulation was breathtaking. She was stealing from me while positioning herself as Henry's surrogate, fulfilling his wishes to protect me. He always said you were like a sister to me. He was a good man. He knew how much I care about you. After she left, promising to return the next day to continue getting things organized, I sat in my empty house and felt something cold settle in my chest. It wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal of everything I'd believed about our friendship, about her character, about my own judgment. For 20 years, I'd shared my deepest fears and secrets with someone who'd been calculating how to profit from my vulnerability. Every confidence I'd shared, every moment of weakness I'd revealed, every time I'd turned to her for support, all of it had been data she was collecting for this moment. I'd mourned miscarriages with her. I'd celebrated her children's graduations. I'd held her hand through her divorce, helped her find a new apartment, even loaned her money when she was struggling. Money she'd never repaid. Money I now realized she'd never intended to repay. How long had she been planning this? Had she befriended me decades ago with this endgame in mind? Or had the plan evolved gradually as she learned about our assets and my trusting nature? It didn't matter. What mattered was that she'd chosen to see my grief as an opportunity for profit. And now she was going to learn what happened when you underestimated Martha Henley. James called me on Sunday morning. "We have enough," he said. "Bank records, video evidence, recorded confessions. The fraud investigation will be slam dunk. Are you ready to move forward?" "More than ready." "Then we do this tomorrow. I'll file criminal charges and civil suits simultaneously. The police will freeze her assets while the courts sort out restitution. What about the money she's already moved? That's the beauty of financial crimes in the digital age. Every transaction leaves a trail. We'll recover most of it, possibly all of it. And Linda? She's looking at 5 to 10 years for elder fraud and embezzlement. More if we can prove this was premeditated, which the evidence suggests." Monday morning, I woke up before dawn and dressed carefully. Not the grief-stricken widow's wardrobe I'd been wearing for weeks, but the professional attire I'd worn when I was still working. A sharp navy suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a neat bun. I wanted to look like someone who could destroy you in a boardroom, not someone you could manipulate in a kitchen. Linda arrived at 10 o'clock, right on schedule. "Good morning, honey," she said, letting herself in with the spare key I'd never asked her to return. "How are we feeling today?" "Much better, actually." Something in my tone made her pause. "Oh, I've been thinking about what you said. About having people I can trust to help me think clearly. That's good. That's very healthy. So I called some people I trust. People who know about money and legal issues." Her smile faltered slightly. "What kind of people?" "My lawyer, for instance. And a forensic accountant." "Martha, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the $93,000 you've stolen from me over the past 3 months." The color drained from her face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I don't know what you think you've discovered." "I've discovered everything, Linda. Every transaction, every transfer, every lie you've told. I have bank records, video evidence, and recordings of you admitting to the theft." She sat down heavily at my kitchen table, the same table where she'd robbed me while planning my husband's funeral. "You don't understand," she said finally. "I was trying to help you. Protect your money from..." "From what?" "From being available when I need it? From remaining in my own accounts under my own control." "You're not thinking clearly. Grief has made you paranoid. Grief has made me careful. And lucky for me, I recorded our conversation Friday night. The one where you told your accomplice how easy I was to manipulate. Her face went white. You recorded me? I recorded you admitting to theft. I recorded you laughing about how compliant grief made me. I recorded you planning to steal my life insurance money. Martha, please. I can explain. I'm sure you can. You can explain it to the police. As if on cue, there was a knock at my front door. Through the window, I could see 2 officers and James Crawford standing on my porch. That would be them now. Linda started to cry then. Not the gentle tears of someone who was sorry, but the ugly, desperate sobs of someone who'd been caught. Please, she begged. I can pay it back. All of it. My kids, if I go to prison, what happens to my kids? You should have thought about your kids before you decided to steal from a widow. The police were professional and thorough. They read Linda her rights, took her statement, and arrested her on charges of elder fraud, embezzlement, and exploitation of a vulnerable person. As they led her away in handcuffs, she looked back at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear. I trusted you, she called out as they put her in the patrol car. I loved you like a sister. No, I replied. You loved what you thought you could take from me. James stayed after the police left, helping me inventory what had been stolen and begin the process of recovering my assets. How much will I get back? I asked. Most of it, probably all of it. She hadn't had time to hide it effectively, and financial crimes leave excellent paper trails. How long will this take? A few months for full restitution. The criminal case might take longer, but that's not your problem anymore. After James left, I sat alone in my house, truly alone for the first time in 20 years, and felt something unexpected. Relief. Not just because I'd caught Linda and would recover my money, but because I'd proven something to myself. I wasn't the helpless victim she'd assumed I was. I wasn't too old, too grief-stricken, or too trusting to fight back. I was still Martha Henley. I was still the woman who'd built a successful business, who'd navigated complex financial challenges, who'd cared for a dying husband with grace and competence. Grief hadn't made me weak. It had just made me temporarily vulnerable to someone I'd trusted. But that trust, once broken, had revealed something Linda never could have predicted. I was dangerous when I was angry. That was 8 months ago. Linda pleaded guilty to avoid a trial that would have been humiliating for both of us. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution plus interest. I recovered $97,000 of the money she'd stolen, more than I'd expected, thanks to James's thorough asset tracing. She wrote me a letter from prison, claiming she'd been desperate, claiming she'd never meant to hurt me, claiming our friendship had been real despite everything that happened. I threw it away without reading past the first paragraph. Real friends don't steal from you at your husband's funeral. I've rebuilt my life carefully, deliberately, on my own terms. I moved to a smaller house in a different neighborhood, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted a fresh start in a place without memories of betrayal. I volunteer now at a nonprofit that helps elderly people recognize and report financial fraud. It's more common than most people realize, and it almost always follows the same pattern. Someone gains trust gradually, then exploits vulnerability systematically. The warning signs are always there. We just don't want to see them when they're coming from someone we love. I've made new friends carefully, slowly, with appropriate boundaries. I've learned to distinguish between genuine care and calculated positioning. I've discovered that it's possible to be open to connection without being vulnerable to exploitation. Most importantly, I've learned that surviving betrayal doesn't make you cynical. It makes you selective. I still believe in friendship, in kindness, in helping people through difficult times. But I also believe in documentation, verification, and keeping some parts of yourself private until trust is earned through actions, not words. The money Linda stole has been returned, with interest. But the real value of what happened wasn't financial. It was learning that I'm stronger than I knew, smarter than my grief temporarily made me feel, and more capable of protecting myself than anyone who underestimates me will ever realize. If you're listening to this story, if you recognize yourself in Martha or Linda or anyone caught between trust and betrayal, know this: your instincts are usually right. When someone's concern feels performative, it probably is. When kindness comes with strings attached, cut the strings. And remember, Being vulnerable doesn't mean being helpless. Being grieving doesn't mean being stupid. Being trusting doesn't mean being defenseless. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who know us best. But that knowledge cuts both ways. They know how to manipulate us. But we know how to stop them. Trust your instincts. Protect your assets. Document everything. And never, ever let someone mistake your temporary weakness for permanent vulnerability. Some lessons are worth $90,000. Some friendships are worth losing. And some people underestimate us at their own peril.